Does he have a shot at a fair trial? Is that even possible in Hong Kong?
No, not for national security charges. The question is Jimmy Lai going to be sentenced where he does end up passing away in jail?
Mark Simon joins us right now. He is a former executive of Apple Daily, personal friend of Jimmy Lai and their family. Jimmy Lai is an interesting character, to be sure. A convert to our Catholic faith, praise be to God. Somebody who was intimately involved with Cardinal Zen and the Catholic Church there. He could have easily, I would argue, maybe you can correct me, he could have left. He could have saved his family, saved himself, lived comfortably in the West. Why did he stay?
Jimmy stayed, just to be blunt with you, because he had a different term, but he said, I don't want to be a jerk. In other words, I've been on this road with the people of Hong Kong, really since 1989. In other words, as a democracy advocate and a leader of that movement. And to walk out the last minute, to leave the last minute when he's such a prominent person, and he knew where he stood with the mainland Chinese. In other words, Jimmy's, he's not arrogant in any way, but he knows, look, I run the largest newspaper. And the other thing, too, is if I leave, every time I leave, the moment I leave, the newspaper is closed within 30 days. Because he can't ask people to sit there and take fire, and he was right. There are 6 of our people in jail, in other words, 6 editors and are in jail. They were slowly picked off. So he stayed because in his mind, that was really the right thing to do. And it was the only thing to do as well. And he had the opportunity to leave. There's no doubt about that.
Did he support the victims of the 89 Tiananmen Square massacre?
That's where he really got started. In other words, Jimmy had a political awakening. He always says, he said, I was focused on I had come to Hong Kong as an immigrant. He was focused on money. He was focused on making a life. He was focused on the things that so many immigrants have happen in their lives when they come to a new country. And he was doing very, very well. There's no doubt about it. And he basically saw the Tiananmen massacre, and he said it was like China was calling to him. And so lo and behold, he got involved. He started making shirts. He owned a large outlet called Giordano. He started making shirts, T-shirts. He sent up support financially and also through tents to Tiananmen. And when he did this, it became obvious that the Chinese authorities first became aware of him. He was also entering publishing at that time. He was moving from garments to publishing. And when you're in publishing, the simple fact of the matter is, in a free society, which Hong Kong was back then, to be fair, you were going to run afoul of a communist regime. So he ran afoul of them really in the 1989, 1990. They talked to him. People came to visit and said, what are you doing? But it was in 1994 when the break really happened. And that's when he wrote what we always said is the most expensive newspaper column in history. He wrote a column where he insulted the leader Li Peng for the Tiananmen massacre, called him some rather nasty names. We are a tabloid. And after that point, they forced him to sell his company Giordano. That really kicked it off. Then in 1995, when Apple Daily came around, very quickly it became alternating between the number 1 and the number newspaper in Hong Kong. Then we went into Taiwan in 2003 with Next Magazine and then Apple Daily. So Jimmy was fairly well established on the other side of the line from the Chinese, communist Chinese.
The British having control of Hong Kong was coming to an end and the communist government in China was going to take over. Did they know that big changes were about to happen? Were they embracing those changes? What was that like? I can't begin to understand as an outsider what that might have been like.
I'm so old. I was there. I actually came to Hong Kong in 1991. And I was then based in the Philippines, but I had been in the Hong Kong until 1995, but I was back every 2 weeks because of my work. I was not working for Jimmy yet. There was great trepidation. Jimmy fully expected to be arrested. I had 2 or 3 friends at that time who were involved in the democracy movement. They were expecting to be arrested. Previously to 1997, many people, as did Jimmy, got passports overseas. Jimmy is a full British citizen. Just he's not what you call a B&O passport holder, like a green card holder in America. Jimmy is a full British citizen, and he got that in 1994 from the British government. People knew it was coming. Hong Kong is a land of migrants and immigrants from the mainland. So in other words, there's very few Hong Kong people. In other words, I know a few people who said, yes, my grandfather was born in Hong Kong, who are my age. Most people, their parents came over or they came over. It's still a heavy input. I mean, it's still something. I think it's something like 18,000 a year come over the border. And that's been going on for 25, 30 years. The city constantly is pulling in immigrants from China. Jimmy was part of that migrant that came across. His family had suffered greatly under the communists. So he knew what was coming. And you know, when you talk to him and you know him as long as I have and you read his writings, he thought that in 1998, he thought he'd make it to about 1998 before they went and closed Apple Daily down. But look, you have to be fair. They really kept their hands off Hong Kong in many, many ways, as much as could be expected up until, I'd say, 2012, 2013, when a certain gentleman showed up, and his name is Xi Jinping. It's a complete sea change, complete. It's kind of like somebody walks in your room and you've been dealing with them all day long, and you look up, and before you, they had a business suit on, and they had all the trappings of the West on when they dealt with you. Of course, they were a real pain in the butt to deal with, but you know, you didn't have too many problems with them. And lo and behold, they come in one morning and they're wearing like the Mao suit. They've got the little red book in their hand, and they're showing up to bear. Xi Jinping is probably the most significant figure in Chinese history since Mao. And I say that Deng Xiaoping, very significant, opened it up. This guy is very, very serious. He's a true China nationalist. We have to remember that. And that he thinks China has been, you know, basically done hard by the West. But the people in Hong Kong, I think they basically had gritted their teeth and they said, all right, they're not going to kill the golden goose. We make a lot of money for them. We're very important, which they were correct. And the Chinese essentially took control politically and then just started playing around on the side. But they never really stepped in and took control of the society until around 2011, 2012. When we had something called the National Patriotic Education Movement. It'd be like coming into our schools and saying, this is the new curriculum for national education, our version, you know, the PLA, the Communist Party version.
Jimmy Lai and Cardinal Zen. What was their relationship like?
It was fantastic. National Catholic Register gave me the privilege yesterday. It just came out, a piece I wrote. I always view Jimmy Lai's Catholicism through Cardinal Zen, because Cardinal Zen brought him into the church. They're both very much the same people. And it's kind of unique. In words, they both were born in China. Cardinal Zen, born a Catholic, Jimmy, who later became a convert. There's about 15 years difference in their ages, but they came up in basically the same time. Cardinal Zen in the 1940s, which was a very, very rough time, and Jimmy in the 1950s, which was a very rough time. These are tough guys. They're tough men, but they're not tough in a brashness. They're not tough in violence. Their resoluteness is what always impresses me. They both basically have decided to walk the walk they're walking. They show their faith every day. Jimmy's faith is not something that he sits in the past and has been so open about. In other words, I hate to say it, we're a couple of media guys and construction guys. We don't talk about our faith all day long, but we do. You know, we show up to church, we show up to mass. But Cardinal Zen and Jimmy, they are incredibly simple, non-complex men. I don't mean that they're not educated. I mean, they're both. You can't even have a conversation with them sometimes. I tease them when I was out on the boat. They were talking about something, and I said, "You might as well be speaking in Klingon." Then I had to explain to what Klingon was.
Does he have a shot at a fair trial? Is that even possible in Hong Kong?
No, not for national security charges. He's got a national security prosecutor. He's got the national security police. He's got national security judges. All these people are handpicked by Beijing.
Wow.
They're not just handpicked, they're scrutinized. They are selected for their loyalty. The other day, the Secretary of Security bragged that he had a 100% conviction rate on national security charges. Of course, he has a 100% conviction rate because it's in front of judges that do it. One of the mistakes sometimes that we make on the outside in dealing with the communists is we let them adopt our language. The communist Chinese like to use the language in Hong Kong of a legal system. They like to have it presented that way. It is not a legal system that we would recognize once you go through it. I've been involved in it because of politics a couple of times. I actually have warrants out on me. It's no secret there. But because of the activities of the newspaper. So I've seen it firsthand. Jimmy is basically up there because he fulfills a narrative. And I guess if your audience would follow this, essentially they have to have Jimmy Lai be convicted because Jimmy Lai is their entire linchpin in terms of arguing that there were foreign forces that were out to overthrow the Hong Kong government and cause problems for China. They cannot, in their ideology, allow the Hong Kong people to be thought that they have their own agency, that they as individuals would choose democracy. So there has to be an outside influence. And that outside influence has to be Jimmy Lai. That outside influence has to be other outsiders. As we'll see, a lot of names came up from Mike Pence to Jack Keane to other names come up. We're going to see a lot of people's Luke DePulford, Benedict Rogers, all these people will be thrown in there, myself, as foreign agents. And that's what's going to happen here. Jimmy is really, to be perfectly honest with you, he has put himself out there. He has supported democracy for years. His newspaper has been a major thorn in the side, if not the sole thorn in the side of the communist Chinese in Hong Kong and somewhat Taiwan. So now, in their mind, it's time to pay the piper. The question is Jimmy Lai going to be sentenced to a sentence and they're going to carry it out where he does end up passing away in jail? He's 76. He has diabetes. He's a pretty hardy guy. I mean, he's a tough guy. He handles himself well, but he's 76 and he's in a hard jail. Stanley Prison was built and used by the Japanese. So it's not a pleasant place. He's not abused. I would be very clear on that. The Correctional Services Department doesn't abuse him, but it's a lousy place to be for a 76-year-old guy.
Why doesn't the Vatican support him, Cardinal Zen, total silence? Why isn't there more support for Jimmy Lai?
From the bishops, I think it's because they know the Vatican doesn't want them to support him. From the Vatican, it's all about one thing, the deal. And the deal basically leads you back to Cardinal Zen, who has opposed appeasement and opposed the deal that was cut with the Vatican by Francis since day one. He's been vocal. He's been active. He is a very troublesome figure for the Vatican. There is very little doubt that Francis doesn't like him. We've seen what happens to cardinals that they don't like with Cardinal Burke and with others. And I think the fact of the matter is that I don't think they've intentionally done this, but they have abandoned Cardinal Zen. They have abandoned Jimmy Lai, and they've abandoned a lot more Catholics. There's a lot of Catholics in jail. Catholics were a major part of the democratic movement and remain so. And what they've done is they've basically done that because of the deal. Everybody knows the deal where we'll open up China to Catholics, where the Catholic faith will be allowed to flourish under the Communist Party. This has been an utter disaster. There's nobody who even defends this anymore in the Vatican. They just want it to go away. But it's a sore spot. And we have, unfortunately, with Pope Francis, quite active solicitation of the Chinese Communist Party still. I'm sure you saw it, but a lot of people may have missed it. The Pope was in Mongolia. He brought up the two cardinals, one retired Cardinal Tung and the current active Cardinal Chow, to Mongolia, where he basically told them you need to be good, have your flock be good citizens. In other words, he told them to follow the Chinese Communist Party. There was no other interpretation. There's no other anything. It was not seen by anybody else but a way to make the Catholic Church in Hong Kong bow. And the problem you have is Jimmy Lai and Cardinal Zen are joined at the hip. They really are. Yeah. They're actually very good friends. It's not just a priest-parishioner relationship. These men are good friends. And Cardinal Zen, who showed up the other day, it was this amazing movie-like walk almost. You see this man on a cane walking up to the priest, and you actually see the police step back a little bit. Because Hong Kong, a lot of people went to Catholic schools. Cardinal Zen's a powerful figure. You see him come up. You see people almost looking around as if they can smooth the way for him. I tell people, I've spent a lot of time with Cardinal Zen, and I love the guy. And he is an amazing man, and he is in many ways a man outside his church in Hong Kong, because of course the priests of there love him, the sisters love him, many of the faithful there love him, but he is a troublesome man. He's problematic. It's one of the things we always forget about people. You know, when you go back and read the history of Poland, or when you read the history of Eastern Europe, you can see that many of the activist priests, they were not always warmly taken care of in their local church, because they were seen as trouble. Cardinal Zen has that problem up at the Vatican. And the real problem they have is that Francis, and I think they have no comprehension of how this is going to affect his legacy in China. He has abandoned Jimmy, and the communist Chinese know it. That's the worst thing about it. They know there's no help coming to Jimmy Lai from Pope Francis. None. Clergy is allowed in to see Jimmy. As I said, the Correctional Services Department does allow clergy in. The problem is the national security guys treat Cardinal Zen, because he also has charges against him, by the way. They just haven't prosecuted him. They don't have that much nerve yet. And he would happily take it. He would happily take it. In fact, he even tried a couple of times to get it. We know that, but people have talked him out of it. He's more valuable outside. But yeah, he can see Jimmy when they allow him to see Jimmy, when they allow it.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here, because you don't want to miss anything.